Picture a desert night, so still it feels unfinished. Then, almost invisibly, a yucca opens. Tall stalk, white flowers, a pale glow in the dark. If you walked past it the next day, you might think you saw something simple. A plant blooming, same as plants do. But that flower may have spent the whole night waiting for one tiny partner. And if that partner never came, the bloom could wither, having accomplished almost nothing. No seeds, no next generation. A living plant, but a broken future. That is one of the strangest truths in the plant world. Some plants do not just benefit from a certain partner. They are built around one, a specific moth, a specific wasp, a specific fungus in the soil. Remove that relationship, and the plant may still look alive while its real survival starts to disappear. Most of us assume flowers are opportunists. A bee comes by, great. A butterfly comes by, also great. Anyone carrying pollen seems useful. And to be fair, that assumption makes sense. A lot of plants are generalists. They take visits from many pollinators, spread their chances around, and do just fine. But some plants do the opposite. They narrow the doorway. They tune their scent, their shape, their timing, even the chemistry of their tissues so precisely that only one kind of partner really fits. From the outside, that can look reckless. Why would evolution gamble everything on one relationship? Because what looks like fragility is often precision, and precision in the right environment can be incredibly powerful. Biology is rarely as neat as a lock with one key. But some plant partnerships come remarkably close. They are the result of coevolution, where two species keep reshaping each other across generations, not by planning, not by intention, by a long, relentless filtering of what works. A flower that opens at night will favor night visitors. A deep nectar tube favors bodies that can reach it. A scent released only at a certain hour reaches the animals awake at that hour. A root that recognizes one microbial signal, and not another, changes which underground alliances are even possible. Over time, the plant is not just surviving in an environment. It is surviving inside a relationship. And specialization is not only about visible shape, it is chemistry. Floral scent is a blend of molecules, and different animals smell the world very differently. What seems faint or pleasant to us may be intensely specific to a moth, a beetle, or a bee. Surface compounds on pollen and stigma affect whether pollination actually works. Roots leak sugars, acids, and other exudates into the soil, changing which microbes gather nearby. Plants are constantly broadcasting, screening, and responding. So when a plant seems absurdly picky, it may not be picky in the emotional sense at all. It may simply be tuned to a signal that almost nothing else can provide. The yucca is one of the clearest examples. Yucca flowers are pollinated by yucca moths. And the moth does something that still feels almost unbelievable the first time you hear it. She does not accidentally dust the flower while feeding. She actively gathers pollen, rolls it into a ball, flies to another flower, and deliberately packs that pollen onto the flower's stigma, the part that has to receive it for seeds to form. Then she lays her eggs in the flower. When the seeds develop, her larvae will eat some of them. So at first, this sounds like exploitation. The plant gets used, the moth gets the meal. Except that without the moth, the plant is barely pollinated at all. And without the plant, the moth has nowhere suitable to reproduce. Each needs the other, badly enough that the relationship holds. Researchers like Ola Pelmier, who studied this system in depth, helped show that the plant is not a passive victim in this arrangement. If a moth lays too many eggs, some yuccas can abort that fruit early. In plain language, the plant cuts off the deal. It stops investing in a seed pod that is likely to be overconsumed. That is not conscious punishment in the human sense. But it is a beautifully hard piece of biological logic. The plant senses conditions, integrates signals, and changes its investment. Cooperate too little, and the moth fails. Exploit too much, and the plant withdraws. What you are looking at is not a decorative flower. It is a negotiation. This is where plant behavior gets much deeper than most of us were taught. Plants do not have neurons or brains. But in the field, sometimes called plant neurobiology, researchers study how plants sense, signal, and coordinate responses across their bodies. Electrical changes move through tissues. Calcium waves carry information from cell to cell. Hormones rise, fall, and interact. Chemical compounds released into air and soil act like messages, warnings, invitations, and filters. Some biologists describe this as distributed decision-making. Not a mind like ours. Not a brain hidden in the stem, but information processing spread across the living body. So when a plant appears to wait for one partner, that waiting is not empty. It is built on timing systems, signal traffic, chemical recognition, and resource decisions. The plant is tracking light, darkness, temperature, moisture, touch, internal energy, and the biological aftermath of each encounter. Not a brain, but definitely not passivity. And once you see that, specialization stops looking like a romantic coincidence and starts looking like a survival strategy. If the right partner is reliable, being selective can save energy. The plant does not have to attract half the insect world. It can invest in one body plan, one schedule, one chemical language. It can make pollen transfer more accurate. It can reduce waste. It can, in a very real sense, turn reproduction from chance into targeted delivery. Charles Darwin understood this logic better than most people of his time. When he examined the Madagascar star orchid, with its extraordinarily long nectar spur, he argued that a matching moth had to exist, one capable of reaching that nectar and carrying the plant's pollen. At the time, that sounded ridiculous to some people. Later, a moth fitting that prediction was documented. Darwin was reading the plant like evidence. The flower's shape was a record of the partner it expected, and shape is only part of the story. In some orchids, the chemistry is even more startling. Biologists studying bee orchids in the genus Ophrys have shown that the flower can mimic the scent of female insects closely enough to lure specific males. To us, the orchid seems still and silent. To the insect, it is sending an intensely targeted signal. That is not decoration. That is signal design. And sometimes the specificity goes even deeper than the visible flower. It goes underground. Orchids are famous for their flowers, but many of their most intimate partnerships begin as dust-like seeds in the soil. Orchid seeds are so tiny and so stripped down that many of them carry almost no stored food. They cannot simply drop into the ground and power themselves into life. They often need help from mycorrhizal fungi, fungal partners that enter the seed or root tissue and provide access to nutrients and carbon. Researchers at places like the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and orchid biologists around the world have shown just how narrow some of these relationships can be. Not every orchid needs one single fungal species forever. Nature is messier than that. But some orchids are highly specific, depending on one very narrow group of fungi to germinate or persist. Without the right fungal partner in the soil, the seed may simply remain a possibility that never becomes a plant. And at the root surface, this is not just passive absorption. Plants and fungi exchange chemical cues. Genes switch on, tissues change. Membranes allow entry or resist it. If the molecular conversation matches, the relationship forms. If it does not, the door stays shut. So, even underground, the plant is not merely being helped. It is recognizing. Think about what that means emotionally. The orchid flower we admire is not only a bloom. It is the visible surface of an old underground relationship. A future flower exists because a seed encountered the right microscopic ally in the right soil, under the right conditions, and accepted the right chemical welcome. We usually call this dependence, but that word can be misleading. Dependence sounds weak. What these plants show us is something closer to recognition. They are not accepting just any help. They are screening the world. They are tuned to particular signals and rejecting most others. In human terms, we celebrate self-sufficiency. In ecological terms, life is often built from exact relationships. To need the right partner is not always a flaw. Sometimes it is the signature of a lineage so refined that almost nothing else will do. Figs push this idea even further. Many fig species are closely paired with their own tiny fig wasps. The wasp enters the fig, pollinates hidden flowers inside, and uses the fig as a nursery. The fig, in turn, depends on the wasp to reproduce. Again, it sounds precarious, and it is, but it is also astonishingly efficient. Each partner is not randomly meeting the other. They are finding a world already shaped around the encounter. Now here is the tension underneath all this wonder. A specialized relationship can be brilliant. It can also be heartbreakingly fragile. If a generalist plant loses one pollinator, another may take over. If a specialist loses its one crucial partner, there may be no backup. The plant can still look green. It can still produce leaves. It can still put out flowers. So beautiful, we assume everything is fine. But reproduction can quietly collapse. That is one of the most important things hidden in this story. A healthy plant is not just a plant that is alive. A healthy plant is a plant that is connected. Conservation sometimes misses this. We protect the visible organism and forget the invisible relationship. We fence off the rare orchid, but disturb the soil fungi it needs. We admire the yucca, but erase the habitat, the darkness, or the seasonal conditions its moth relies on. We save the tree and lose the wasp. We keep the body and break the conversation. Modern disruption makes this worse in ways that are easy to overlook. Habitat fragmentation can separate plant and pollinator by a distance that looks trivial on a map, but impossible for a tiny insect. Light pollution can alter the behavior of night-active pollinators. Soil disturbance, compaction, or chemicals can damage the fungal communities some plants depend on. Climate change adds another layer. Many partnerships depend on timing, what biologists call phenology. A plant blooms when temperature, day length, moisture, and internal rhythms line up. Its pollinator emerges when its own cues say it is time. If those cues shift out of sync, even slightly, the appointment can fail. The flower opens too early. The moth arrives too late. The fungus declines in warmer or drier soil. The relationship does not always vanish dramatically. Sometimes it just misses, season after season, until absence becomes the new normal. And there is a psychological sting in that. Because, from a human distance, we are tempted to judge by appearance. Leafy means healthy, flowering means successful, still standing means safe. Plants keep teaching us how incomplete that view is. A bloom can be a warning. A lone survivor can already be ecologically stranded. An organism can be present while its future is gone. This is the reframe that changes everything for me. When a plant survives only with one specific partner, that is not evidence that the plant is simple. It is evidence that the plant is living inside a highly processed map of its world. It has been shaped by selection to recognize certain scents, certain bodies, certain microbes, certain rhythms, and to make bets that only make sense inside that relationship. What looks passive is often exacting. What looks still is often listening. What looks fragile is sometimes the edge of extraordinary precision, and maybe that is part of why these partnerships move us. They reveal something easy to miss in everyday life. Nature is not held together only by strength, competition, and independence. A lot of it is held together by fit, by timing, by mutual recognition, by the quiet success of one life making room for another, and one signal being answered by the right receiver. So, the next time you see a flower that opens at dusk, or an orchid growing in one impossibly specific place, or a plant that seems strangely selective about where it lives, it may not be fussy for no reason. It may be waiting on an ancient agreement, a chemical password, a partner hidden in the dark or under the soil, or inside the architecture of the flower itself. And once you realize that, the plant in front of you changes. It is no longer just an object rooted in place. It is the visible half of a conversation. That, to me, is the real wonder here. Some plants survive not by mastering the whole world, but by becoming exquisitely legible to one small part of it. One moth, one wasp, one fungus, one relationship precise enough to carry a species through time. If you've ever seen a plant that made more sense once you learned what it depends on, tell me in the comments. Those hidden partnerships are often where plant life becomes most astonishing. And if you want more science-backed stories that make ordinary plants feel deeper, stranger, and more alive, subscribe.